Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating, deep structural crisis unfolding right in front of us. And it all starts with this massive historical irony. You see, Russia actually thinks it knows exactly how a massive brain drain ends because they've run this experiment before. We're looking at a system that fully expects history to just repeat itself. But as we're going to see today, the data is telling a completely different, much more permanent story about a true demographic collapse driving a massive labor shortage.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Back in 1992, as the country was collapsing, government economists were in a state of absolute panic. They predicted that up to 1.5 million scientists would flee the country by the year 2000. But the reality vastly undershot that panic. Only about 80,000 actually left. And the vast majority of those highly skilled workers, they eventually just drifted back home during the oil boom of the 2000s. Because of that historical memory, the state right now views the current crisis as just another false alarm, a temporary blip that's absolutely going to correct itself.
Section 1. The 2022 Talent Exodus. A quiet erasure. Because this time around, the reality is quietly, vastly worse than those historical warnings. To really understand the sheer scale of what's happening today, take a look at this number. Somewhere between 800,000 and just over 900,000 Russians left the country after the 2022 invasion, and they never came back. Let's anchor that abstract number to a physical reality for a second. I want you to imagine the entire population of a major regional capital simply packing up, walking out the door, and being quietly erased from the map. That is the staggering volume of human capital we're actually talking about here.
And this brilliantly illustrates that the real damage isn't just the sheer volume of people, it's who left. Fully 80% of these missing émigrés are college-educated. This is a severe, unprecedented hollowing out of the intellectual and technical elite. In fact, the government's own industry association admitted, completely on the record, that at least 100,000 IT specialists alone left in just the first year.
So where did all this talent go? Well, initially, they scattered into this improvised archipelago of exile. Hubs like Tbilisi, Yerevan, Almaty, Belgrade, Tel Aviv, and Dubai absorbed tens of thousands of these professionals. But what the data is showing us right now is that these temporary hubs are actually starting to hollow out again. As the prospect of returning home fades away, this temporary refuge is turning into a permanent limbo. These highly trained specialists are now migrating a second time, chasing better, long-term opportunities even further away from home.
Section 2. Failed bribes and punishments. Desperate measures. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the state reacted. When a government realizes it's losing its most critical minds, what does it do? It tries to buy its elite workforce back. And you can see the sheer desperation in Moscow's offers here. They rolled out draft deferments specifically for employees of accredited tech firms. They offered highly subsidized mortgages solely for IT workers under 50. They even slashed profit taxes down to a mere fraction of the standard rate. The state was literally naming out loud, through its financial policies, exactly which citizens it fundamentally could not afford to lose.
But check out this tiny sliver on the chart. Based on the most rigorous academic tracking we have available, a massive panel monitoring over 8,000 émigrés, fewer than 1 in 10 have actually returned. Over 90% remain in exile. This tiny sliver drives home the absolute permanence of this brain drain. The state's financial bribes completely and spectacularly failed to reverse the tide.
So when the carrots fail, out come the sticks. The very deferment regime that was designed to keep these tech workers is now being rapidly dismantled. Why? Because raw, wartime manpower needs are suddenly overriding the economic logic that built those protections in the first place. These émigrés are now facing new laws that will strip them of their banking access, block them from selling their property back home, and even deny them passport renewals. It is an incredibly rapid, punitive pivot.
And in a really stark representation of how inescapable this manpower drive has become, we have records showing at least 3 U.S. deportation flights returning Russian asylum seekers directly to Moscow. Now, these were individuals who originally fled conscription, but upon landing, several were met right on the tarmac and immediately handed military summonses.
Section 3. The devastating economic math. A shortage spiral.
An unrecoverable exodus of this magnitude leaves behind an absolutely staggering disaster in the numbers. Take a look at this severe disconnect here. Inside the country, domestic IT wages have jumped an incredible 72%. Now, in a normal economy, you'd think, hey, that signifies a massive boom. But look right next to it. Real sector growth has nearly halved. So what you're looking at isn't an economic recovery, it's a shortage spiral. Companies are paying exorbitant premiums simply because the workers they need literally no longer exist within the borders.
And if you want a perfect visual representation of how impossible it is to innovate without your IT workforce, look at this massive disparity. This is Russia's flagship plan to replace Western software. The state poured 187 billion rubles into this project. And what did it generate in actual sales? 1.6 billion. They spent 116 times more money than they actually earned. It is a catastrophic return on investment, and it's driven directly by that absence of human capital.
Section 4, the missing generation, the demographic void.
So the crucial point is, we aren't just talking about a tech dream anymore. We need to shift our focus to the macro-level demographic collapse that makes this labor shortage truly insurmountable. Just listen to the Russian central bank governor. This April, she stated on the record that the country faces a labor shortage for the first time in modern history. This isn't Western speculation, guys. This is a startling, direct admission from the very institution managing the crisis.
She's talking about a void of 1.5 million workers. That is the massive number of additional people the economy needs right now just to restore a basic baseline balance. And remember, economic projections estimate that by the end of the decade, this shortfall is going to grow by millions more. Now you might be wondering, why can't they just wait for the next generation to enter the workforce, kind of like they did back in the 90s? Well, look at this grim demographic compounding effect. Birth rates are literally at their lowest level in modern Russian history. On top of that, you have somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 working-age men dead due to the war. The labor shortage is completely insurmountable because there's absolutely no replacement generation waiting behind to fill this void.
And this really brings our whole story full circle. 30 years ago, Russia panicked about a brain drain that was, ultimately, a wound that healed itself. But this current crisis, it's entirely different. The highly educated people who could leave, they left. The essential workers the state desperately tried to keep, they left anyway. And the children who mathematically should have grown up to replace them were simply never born. This is a wound with absolutely nothing behind it to heal with.
So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. As this unprecedented demographic collapse continues to unfold, how does an economy, or a nation really, survive a permanent brain drain when the replacement generation was never born? It's a huge question with profound global and geopolitical implications, and we're definitely going to be watching it closely for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped map out the reality behind the numbers.